Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take that absolute flood of global news you see every day.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
It really is. And we try to boil it down, find the core insights, the connections, so you get a really sharp, comprehensive picture of what's going on.
Exactly. Today, we've got a pretty wide range of sources from all over. We'll be hitting the big stuff, tech competition, geopolitics, obviously, but also those essential market updates, societal shifts, even some human stories that tell a bigger tale.
The mission, as always, is to pull out the truly relevant knowledge, give you that clear, balanced understanding.
And we're aiming for depth, but moving quickly.
Right. We have to. We'll start right at the cutting edge science, tech, space. That's where so much is being built right now.
Okay, let's jump in. Segment 1, science, space, and the AI revolution. The compute power race is definitely front and center.
It really is. For so long, NVIDIA seemed like the only game in town for serious AI hardware. But, well, this week changed that narrative, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A really strategic alliance just got announced. We're talking Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, and OpenAI.
And this isn't just like a small order for chips?
No, far from it. This is OpenAI making a colossal commitment. They're planning to deploy 6 gigawatts worth of AMD GPUs, graphics processing units.
6 gigawatts. That number just, it's staggering. Can you put that in perspective? What does 6 gigawatts actually mean in terms of power?
Well, think about it like this. That's roughly the power output of 6 large nuclear power plants, all dedicated to AI. Training models, running inference. It's an immense amount of computational power they're locking in.
Wow. And the market reaction?
Instantaneous. AMD stock jumped, what was it, 25%?
Yeah.
A huge surge. NVIDIA, meanwhile, took a noticeable dip. It tells you the market sees this as a genuine challenge to NVIDIA's dominance.
So OpenAI, and you have to assume their big backers like Microsoft, are deliberately building an alternative. They don't want to be locked into just one supplier.
Precisely. It's strategic diversification 101, but at a massive scale. Relying on a single vendor, even a great one like NVIDIA, creates a bottleneck. It's a long-term risk they're clearly trying to mitigate.
So it's about cost, competition, but also maybe leverage down the line.
Absolute leverage. And potentially customization, too. This signals AMD might be willing to tailor its hardware more specifically for OpenAI's massive language model needs. That's something harder for a company like NVIDIA serving everyone to do at the same level for every single client.
That's where the real competition could heat up custom silicon for specific AI tasks.
Exactly. Now, this whole hardware arms race, it's got huge geopolitical dimensions, too, especially when you look east towards Beijing.
Right. China's push for technological self-sufficiency. How does this AMD OpenAI deal play into that?
Well, it highlights the Western alliances forming, which only intensifies Beijing's drive to go domestic. They're pushing, really quite aggressively, for Chinese companies to adopt locally made chips. It's partly national security controlling critical tech.
And partly about breaking reliance on foreign giants like NVIDIA, especially with all the U.S. export controls?
Definitely. They see the writing on the wall with restrictions tightening.
Yeah.
They want to insulate themselves from that pressure.
But switching from NVIDIA, that's not easy, is it? It's more than just the chip itself.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult. NVIDIA's real power isn't just the hardware, it's CUDA, their software ecosystem. It's deeply embedded. Chinese firms have to retrain engineers, rewrite code, optimize for entirely different architectures.
So they're potentially accepting lower performance, at least initially.
That seems to be the calculation. Beijing is betting that the long-term strategic gain of independence is worth the short to medium-term pain and, yeah, probably performance hit. It's a massive national project.
Okay, let's shift from that macro chip war to something more immediate AI in healthcare. This Australian company, Haiti Health, caught my eye.
Yes, Haiti Health. It's a great example of AI making a tangible difference right now.
Yeah.
They just raised, what, $65 million? Puts their valuation around $465 million.
So what do they actually do?
They've developed an AI-powered medical scribe. Basically, it listens in on a doctor-patient consultation.
Like, just listens to the conversation.
Yeah, the natural conversation. And then it doesn't just transcribe it, it synthesizes that conversation into structured clinical notes, automatically fills out the electronic health records, the EHR system.
That tackles a huge burnout issue for clinicians, right? All that paperwork.
Exactly. Doctors and nurses spend hours on documentation. This aims to automate a huge chunk of that administrative burden. They say it's already used in over 100 countries.
Over 100. Wow. That suggests they've really nailed a major pain point. better data, less clinician time wasted?
Reports do show significant time savings. But, it's not without friction. The big hurdle is always integrating with those existing EHR systems.
Ah, the legacy systems, always the bottleneck.
Right. They're often old, proprietary, vary wildly between hospitals, between countries. So you have this sophisticated AI output, but you still need to jam it into these rigid, older databases. That adds complexity and cost up front.
Still, a powerful application. Now, thinking about the next generation, there's this story about a 19-year-old founder.
Yeah, Dravya Shah, based in Mumbai, India. His startup is called Super Memory, and it's apparently got backing from some Google executives already.
Super memory. What problem are they tackling?
It's focused on what might be the next big bottleneck in AI after chips. Context retention. Memory.
Ah, right. Current models, like the big language models, they kind of forget things quickly, don't they?
They do. Their memory window is actually quite short. They struggle to retain context from earlier in a long conversation. It limits how truly intelligent or, well, human-like they can seem.
So supermemory is trying to give AI a better memory. But wait, if that's such a fundamental AI problem, how is a startup tackling it? Why haven't the big players cracked this?
That's the key question. It seems Shah's team isn't trying to rebuild the core large language model, the LLM itself. Instead, they've designed a kind of external memory layer.
Like a separate system that plugs in?
Sort of, yeah. A proprietary system that sits alongside the main AI model and interacts with it. It's built specifically for super-fast, scalable storage and retrieval of past information, effectively working around the LLM's own internal memory limits.
Interesting. So it's less a threat to the big models, more like an enhancement, a plug-in memory boost.
That seems to be how investors, like those Google execs, are seeing it. An innovative add-on that could make existing multi-billion-dollar AI systems much more capable.
Fascinating. Okay, from the intricacies of AI memory, let's zoom way out to the cosmos. The James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, keeps delivering.
Doesn't it just? The latest images are of the Lobster Nebula, NGC 6357, technically. It's about 5,500 light-years away over in the constellation Scorpius.
And the images are just incredible.
Breathtaking. Because Webb sees in infrared, it pierces through all the gas and dust that normally obscures our view. So we're seeing thousands of stars right as they're forming. A true stellar nursery.
A stellar maternity ward. What are scientists learning specifically from these new pictures?
They're looking really closely at the central cluster in the nebula, called Pismis 24. It contains some of the most massive and hottest stars known.
And these giant stars, they impact their surroundings.
Massively.
Yeah.
Their intense radiation and powerful stellar winds are literally sculpting the nebula, carving out cavities, triggering or maybe even preventing the next generation of stars from forming nearby. Studying that interaction helps refine our models of star formation across the universe.
Amazing. While Webb looks at star birth, other astronomers are looking at these weird giant structures, odd radio circles, ORCs.
Yeah, ORCs. And there's been a big discovery. They've found the most powerful and distant one yet. This thing is almost 10 billion light-years away, meaning we're seeing it as it was 10 billion years ago.
Wow! And it's how big?
Get this, it's about 50 times the diameter of our entire Milky Way galaxy.
50 times. Okay, that must challenge the existing theories about what ORCs are. What was the leading idea?
Previously, the thinking was they might be remnants of really violent but relatively localized events, like maybe two supermassive black holes merging within a single galaxy, creating an expanding shockwave we see in radio waves.
But this new one is just too big for that.
Way too big and too old. The analysis now suggests it's likely powered by something more galaxy-wide, galactic superwinds.
Superwinds, like massive outflows from the galaxy itself.
Exactly. Huge outflows of gas and energy driven by intense star formation or quasar activity in the galaxy's core billions of years ago. These outflows could create enormous, expanding bubbles that we see as ORCs. It shifts them from being like cosmic accidents to potentially tracers of major galactic evolution phases.
That's a fundamental shift in understanding. Speaking of fundamental mysteries, there's potentially progress on a 60-year-old puzzle. Ultra-high-energy cosmic rays.
UACRs.
Yes, researchers at NTNU, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, they're proposing a solution to where these incredibly energetic particles come from. These UACRs have energies far beyond anything we can create in particle accelerators on Earth, and the source has been a mystery for decades.
60 years. The problem is these UECRs are atomic nuclei, so they have an electric charge. As they travel across intergalactic space, their paths get bent by magnetic fields. You can't just trace them back in a straight line to see where they originated.
So what's the NTNU theory?
They're pointing the finger at supermassive black holes, not just as gravity wells, but as colossal particle accelerators. They suggest the chaotic, powerful magnetic fields near these black holes can accelerate atomic nuclei up to like half the speed of light.
Half the speed of light. And this mechanism could actually generate the kind of extreme energies we see in UACRs.
It's the first theoretically solid mechanism proposed that seems capable of producing those energies. It suggests these black hole environments are pretty much the only places in the universe powerful enough. It really changes how we think about the influence black holes have, not just gravitationally, but on the actual particle content of the cosmos.
Incredible. Before we leave space, a couple of quick milestones. First, it's the 30th anniversary of a big moment in astronomy.
Yeah, 30 years since the confirmed discovery of 51 Pegasi b. That was really the first exoplanet found orbiting a sun-like star. It basically kicked off the entire exoplanet revolution, proving planets outside our solar system are common. Huge moment.
Open the floodgates, and closer to home, on Mars.
A potentially really exciting observation. NASA's Perseverance rover, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, might have actually spotted an interstellar comet named Three-Eyed-Lys in the Martian night sky.
An interstellar comet, meaning it came from outside our solar system.
Exactly. These visitors are incredibly rare. If this sighting is confirmed, it's a fantastic chance to study material that formed around another star entirely. Gives us unique clues about the broader galaxy.
Amazing potential. But there's also an operational update that kind of crashes us back down to Earth, doesn't it, involving NASA's Juno probe?
Yeah, this is where politics directly impacts science. Juno's been orbiting Jupiter since 2016, sending back amazing data about its magnetic field, its deep atmosphere. Yeah. Just invaluable science.
And its status is now uncertain.
It is. Confirmation about whether it's still fully operational or if it's had to scale back is apparently being hampered by the ongoing U.S. government shutdown.
How does the shutdown affect a probe orbiting Jupiter?
Critical mission personnel back on Earth might be furloughed. Communications, diagnostics, command sequences, all that could be delayed or disrupted. It's a stark reminder that years of scientific work and investment can be jeopardized by political gridlock here.
A really tangible, frustrating consequence. Okay, let's shift focus from the vastness of space to the intricacies within us. Our final science section. Medical insights, the brain, disease.
And we have to start with a really quite startling breakthrough regarding glioblastoma. It's one of those aggressive, deadly types of brain cancer.
Right. Usually thought of as being confined to the brain itself. What's the new discovery?
Researchers found it's not just a brain disease, it's actually systemic. They discovered glioblastoma can actively erode the skull bone.
Erode the skull?
Yes. And more than that, it manipulates the immune system within the bone marrow of the skull. It essentially creates pathways, corridors, for inflammatory cells from the marrow to enter the brain, and these cells actually help the cancer grow faster.
Wow, that completely changes the picture. It means just treating the tumor in the brain isn't enough.
Exactly. If the skull and its immune cells are part of the problem, therapies need to target that interaction too. It redefines glioblastoma entirely.
And there's a twist regarding potential treatments.
A deeply ironic one. Some drugs used to strengthen bones might actually make things worse in this context because they could potentially increase the pool of those inflammatory cells the cancer uses. It forces a total rethink of treatment strategies toward more systemic approaches.
A sobering discovery. On a more hopeful note regarding the brain, there's research on aging and memory, spatial memory specifically.
Yes, a study from Stanford University looked at aging mice, focusing on the hippocampus that's the brain's navigation center. As the mice got older, their ability to remember familiar places declined, much like we see age-related memory loss in humans.
And they could see changes in the brain activity.
They could. The complex neural patterns needed for spatial mapping became kind of fragmented, noisier, less distinct with age.
But there was a group that didn't decline, the superagers.
Exactly. A key finding was that a subset of these older mice retained the sharp, organized, youthful brain activity patterns for navigation. They didn't show that age-related decline.
So the hope is, if we can figure out why these superagers resist the decline,
we might find ways to protect human brains too. Understanding what protects their cognitive function, whether it's genetic, physiological, could point towards ways to prevent age-related memory loss, maybe even impacting diseases like Alzheimer's. It's a really promising avenue.
Definitely. And finally, let's acknowledge the pinnacle of medical recognition this week, the Nobel Prize.
Yes. The Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Mary E. Brunkow, Fred Ramsdell, and Shimon Sakaguchi.
And their work was on
Peripheral immune tolerance. It's absolutely fundamental research. It basically explains how our immune system learns not to attack our own body tissues outside of the main immune organs like the thymus, how it distinguished itself from non-self out in the periphery.
Why is that so crucial?
Because if that tolerance fails, you get autoimmune diseases, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes. The list goes on. Their work identified key mechanisms, particularly involving regulatory T cells, that suppress these mistaken self-attacks.
So it underpins our understanding and treatment of all those conditions.
Absolutely. And it's also critical for things like organ transplantation. Minimizing rejection relies on understanding and manipulating these tolerance mechanisms. It's truly foundational work for modern immunology.
A huge achievement. Okay, that wraps up a dense but fascinating look at science and tech. Now we need to pivot, quite sharply, to the often messy and complex world of global flashpoints. Segment 2 begins now.
All right, let's get into the geopolitical landscape. Starting in the Middle East, peace talks are reportedly resuming, but there's also significant friction, even between allies.
Yeah, specifically reported tension between U.S. President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu.
That's right. Sources detail a pretty contentious conversation. President Trump had apparently expressed some optimism publicly about a framework for getting Hamas hostages released. Netanyahu, however, reportedly pushed back hard, basically dismissing the optimism as naive.
And Trump's reaction to being publicly contradicted like that.
According to reports, it was blunt. He criticized Netanyahu for being, and this is a direct quote reported, always so finging negative.
Wow, that's unusually sharp language between these two leaders, publicly reported at least.
It definitely highlights a significant gap in their approach right now. Trump apparently followed up by urging Israel to halt military operations in Gaza, directly linking a pause in fighting to getting the hostages out quickly.
So is this just Trump applying pressure tactics for the negotiations, or does it signal a deeper disagreement on the whole strategy?
It seems like it might be both. Tactically, it pressures Netanyahu towards flexibility. But fundamentally, it could reflect different priorities. Trump emphasizing the immediate hostage release via de-escalation, while Netanyahu's government prioritizes eliminating the threat from Hamas through continued military action, insisting operational freedom is key for Israel's long-term security.
And despite this top-level friction, actual talks are happening. Indirectly.
Yes, reports indicate indirect negotiations between Israeli and Hamas representatives are taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. They're centered around a 20-point peace plan put forward by the Trump administration.
What are the main sticking points holding things up?
Sources point to three huge ones. First, the timeline and mechanics of Hamas potentially disarming. Second, the incredibly contentious issue of who governs Gaza after the conflict. And third, Israel's insistence on retaining the ability to conduct military operations in Gaza in the future, even with a ceasefire.
And all this is happening right around the second anniversary of the attacks that triggered this latest war?
Yes. That timing adds another layer of difficulty and historical weight to the already immense challenges.
While the diplomats talk, we're also seeing large public reactions globally.
Definitely. There were massive pro-Gaza solidarity marches reported across Europe, London, Paris, Berlin. Huge turnouts reflecting widespread public concern about the humanitarian situation.
And there was also that incident with the activist Greta Thunberg.
Right. She and hundreds of others on an aid flotilla attempting to reach Gaza were intercepted and deported by Israeli authorities. Israel called it a provocation, while the activists framed it as a humanitarian mission. Just adds more fuel to the fire.
Okay, let's shift focus northwards to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, now on day 1,320.
The situation remains intense. Heavy fighting, particularly artillery duels, continues mainly in the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. But we're seeing a significant escalation in terms of types of attacks.
How so? What's changing?
Both sides seem to be increasingly targeting infrastructure deep within each other's territory, moving beyond the immediate front lines. We saw Ukrainian drone strikes reported that caused a major power outage in Russia's Belgorod region near the border. Affected something like 40,000 residents, forced hospitals onto backup generators. That's aimed at disrupting civilian life and critical services.
And on the other side?
Ukrainian officials reported Russian strikes hitting the city of Lviv, which is way in western Ukraine, far from the main conflict zone. Those strikes reportedly killed 4 civilians. It looks like a tit-for-tat pattern targeting energy and infrastructure, causing civilian casualties.
Ukraine has also confirmed hitting targets deep inside Russia itself.
Yes, they've acknowledged successful long-range strikes. Specific targets mentioned include the Sverdlov explosives factory in Nizhny Novgorod. That's about 750 kilometers or nearly 500 miles from the Ukrainian border.
Wow, that's a significant distance.
It is. And also an oil terminal in Russian-occupied Crimea. These deep strikes show Ukraine's improving capabilities and their strategy of trying to degrade Russia's war-making capacity and logistics far behind the lines.
Now, this conflict always seems to have an intelligence and propaganda dimension. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, has been making some claims about the UK.
Yes, the SVR put out a statement claiming the UK is, quote, furious about its supposedly failed strategy against Russia in the war.
Okay, standard rhetoric maybe, but did it go further?
It did. They alleged that a Russian sabotage group was actually trained and sent to the UK. The supposed mission was to attack either a Ukrainian naval vessel docked somewhere in Europe or maybe even a foreign civilian ship.
And the alleged motive for this supposed Russian plot?
According to the SVR narrative, the UK's plan was then to blame the attack on Russia, using it as a pretext to justify sending even more military aid to Ukraine and potentially escalating NATO involvement. Moscow, of course, frames this whole story as the UK trying to stir up fear and escalate tensions. It's hard to verify any of it. Typical information warfare.
Right. Meanwhile, India has weighed in on the economic side effects, criticizing the U.S.
Yes. India's Foreign Minister, S. Jaishankar, very publicly criticized a new U.S. tariff, a 25% punitive tariffs imposed on India's imports of Russian oil.
India's been buying a lot of Russian oil since the war started, hasn't it? Usually at a discount.
Exactly. It's become a major customer, helping India manage its energy costs. Jaishankar called the U.S. tariff unfair and an example of a double standard applied to countries in the global south. His argument is that the U.S. penalizes countries for making trade deals based on their own energy security needs, especially when they don't align perfectly with Western foreign policy.
Interesting friction there. Okay, let's move to another resource-driven tension point, the dispute over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the GERD, on the Nile.
This remains a really critical issue for regional stability involving Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. Egypt recently ramped up its accusations against Ethiopia.
What's the specific complaint now?
Cairo is accusing Addis Ababa of reckless management of the dam, claiming its operations are directly causing or worsening floods in neighboring Sudan. They argue Ethiopia isn't coordinating properly on the dam filling schedule and water releases, threatening downstream water security for millions in both Sudan and Egypt.
But Ethiopia disputes this. Don't they argue the dam actually helps control flooding?
They absolutely do. Ethiopia calls Egypt's claims malicious and politically motivated. They maintain the GERD actually regulates the Nile's flow, mitigating the historical risk of severe seasonal floods. They point to data suggesting it reduces flood peaks.
So who's right?
It's complex.
Yeah.
But the fundamental fear for Egypt and Sudan, regardless of flood control arguments, is the long-term impact on the total volume of water they receive from the Nile. Egypt especially is almost entirely dependent on the Nile. Any significant reduction could be catastrophic for their agriculture and water supply. That core anxiety drives the dispute.
A potential crisis point for sure. Let's cover one last item in this segment. U.S. actions against alleged drug cartels, specifically off the coast of Venezuela. President Trump defended recent military strikes.
Yes, he referred to U.S. military strikes on vessels suspected of belonging to drug cartels near Venezuela. Reports suggest at least 4 such boats have been destroyed since September. Trump called these operations an act of kindness to the U.S.
An act of kindness? How did he justify that?
He claimed they are vital to stopping fentanyl and other drugs from reaching the U.S., asserting each boat destroyed potentially saved thousands of American lives.
But hitting boats in international waters, even if they belong to cartels? That raises legal questions, doesn't it?
Huge questions. Critics and international law experts are raising serious concerns. Does this violate constitutional principles regarding the use of military force? Does it set a precedent for extrajudicial action in international waters?
Is the U.S. claiming it's in a state of conflict with these cartels?
That seems to be part of the debate. Whether the administration is framing this as a non-international armed conflict with cartels, which might provide a legal justification, but doing so without explicit congressional authorization is highly contentious. Plus, the Pentagon hasn't released specific public evidence linking each destroyed vessel definitively to drugs before the strike occurred, which fuels the legal arguments about justification and proportionality.
Definitely a controversial policy. Okay, a lot of friction and conflict globally. Let's turn inward now and look at political and economic instability within nations. Segment 3 starts now.
And we really have to begin here in the United States, with the government shutdown still dragging on. Day 6 now.
Yeah, we already mentioned the impact on the Juno space probe. This has real consequences.
It does. The shutdown continues. No clear end in sight. President Trump is placing the blame squarely on Democrats for the deadlock over the budget. He's also warning that job cuts and furloughs for federal workers are already happening, which increases the pressure.
The political back and forth has been something else. I saw that exchange with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Oh, right. He was on CBS's Face the Nation, speaking from what he called an empty Capitol building, blaming the Democrats for the silence.
And the host, Margaret Brennan, kind of called him out on that.
She did. She pointed out quite directly that it was his own Republican Party leadership that had sent lawmakers home, contributing to the impasse. It was a moment that really captured the partisan finger-pointing and lack of progress.
Beyond the shutdown itself, there are these ongoing legal fights over the president wanting to use military forces domestically.
That's right. A federal judge just blocked President Trump's plan to send National Guard troops from California to Portland, Oregon. This follows similar controversies about potential deployments to Chicago, Illinois.
What was the judge's reasoning in the Portland case?
Concerns about federal overreach, essentially. The judge questioned the legality of using Guard units, particularly those from another state, for what looked like routine domestic law enforcement or crowd control, especially without Oregon's state authorities requesting or consenting to it.
And the legal argument against these deployments generally, what's the core issue?
It often comes down to federalism, the balance of power between state and federal government, and also the Posse Comitatus Act. That's a law restricting the use of the U.S. military for domestic law enforcement. Governors, like Governor Pritzker in Illinois regarding the Chicago situation, argue it amounts to an unconstitutional federal intrusion. These court cases are really important tests of those boundaries.
There's also a very specific and controversial policy proposal from the administration regarding refugees.
Yes, the administration is proposing to slash the number of refugees admitted to the U.S. next year down to just 7,500.
7,500. That's a huge reduction compared to historical levels, even recent ones.
It's a drastic cut. And critically, reports suggest that within this tiny number, the focus would primarily be on admitting white South Africans.
Really? That specific focus?
That's what sources indicate. It signals a significant and potentially race-conscious shift in immigration priorities, fitting alongside broader administration plans reported for things like mass deportations. Very controversial.
Okay, let's cross the Atlantic to the UK. They're dealing with their own set of political and economic challenges, especially around housing.
Yeah, the housing secretary, Steve Reed, announced what he's calling a major shakeup of the housing market system.
What's the main change they're proposing?
The core idea is to force sellers and their agents to provide a lot more essential information about a property up front before it's even listed for sale. Things like known defects, legal issues, leasehold details, etc.
And the goal is to stop sales falling through late in the game and save buyers money.
Exactly. The government argues too many sales collapse because buyers discover major problems only after they've already spent money on surveys and legal fees. They estimate this upfront transparency could save buyers, especially first-time buyers, hundreds of pounds and reduce the stress and time involved in buying a home. Reed called the current system broken.
Meanwhile, the opposition Conservative Party has its own economic plan, focused more on cuts.
That's right. The Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, defended their plan, which involves significant public spending cuts totaling £47 billion. That's a very large figure, signaling a return to austerity measures.
$47 billion in cuts, but they're also offering something specific to home buyers.
Yes, that's the balancing act. They're proposing to use the fiscal space created by those cuts to fund a targeted measure, a £5,000 tax rebate specifically for young, first-time homebuyers.
So cut spending overall, but give a tax break to a specific group. What's the political thinking there?
It's trying to appeal to two different voter bases simultaneously. The massive cuts are aimed at voters worried about national debt and government spending, traditional conservative territory. The £5,000 rebate is a direct pitch to younger voters and families struggling to get on the property ladder, a group the conservatives desperately need to win back. It's a risky strategy, promising both fiscal discipline and targeted help.
And all this is happening while the new conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, is under pressure.
Intense pressure, yes. Reports suggest Tory MPs are getting very anxious about the party's poor performance in opinion polls. They're pushing Baidenach hard to come up with strategies quickly to revitalize the party's image and stop the slide before the next election. There's a real sense of urgency, even desperation, among some backbenchers.
Adding to the UK's domestic challenges is this debate around Britishness and protest laws, especially after an attack in Manchester.
Yes. Following an attack on a synagogue in Manchester, the conversation about national identity and the limits of protest has really intensified. Kemi Badenoch has been particularly outspoken.
What has she been saying?
She's described recent large pro-Palestinian demonstrations as carnivals of hatred. She claims they incite violence and turn British streets into theaters of intimidation, particularly for the Jewish community.
That's strong language. Does it suggest that conservatives might try to bring in tougher laws on protests?
It certainly points in that direction. Her comments signal a potential move towards giving police more power to restrict or manage demonstrations, prioritizing security and preventing hate speech over the absolute right to protest. It's reignited that classic debate about balancing civil liberties with public order and safety.
Okay, let's look at governance challenges elsewhere. France seems to be in a bit of a political storm.
A significant one, yes.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister, Olivier Lecornu, resigned after being in office for only 26 days.
26 days? That's incredibly short. What does that signify for President Macron?
It's a major blow to Macron's authority and signals real instability within his governing coalition. It raises serious questions about their ability to push through reforms and govern effectively, especially at a time when France, like much of Europe, faces significant economic headwinds. It's a deepening political crisis for him.
And while we see that kind of elite instability, there are these grassroots movements emerging, particularly youth-led ones, like in Morocco.
Exactly. In Morocco, we've seen 9 straight nights of protests by a youth movement calling itself Gen Z 212. They're primarily protesting against corruption.
What's driving them?
Disillusionment. They feel systemic corruption is blocking their economic future. They're using social media heavily to organize and demand transparency and accountability from the government.
And similar protests are happening in Madagascar, too, over more basic issues.
Yes, anti-government protests have resumed there, often sparked by frustrations over things like chronic water shortages and power cuts. It points to a broader trend. Young people globally seem increasingly unwilling to accept what they see as governmental failure or corruption, whether it's high-level graft or just the inability to provide basic services.
And interestingly, popular culture is playing a role.
Apparently so. Sources noted that in places like Morocco, themes from the Japanese manga One Piece themes of freedom, rebellion against unjust systems, have become kind of symbolic for some of these Gen Z protesters, a shared cultural touchstone representing their desire for change.
Fascinating how that works. Finally, in this segment, let's touch on the worrying rise of xenophobia in South Africa.
Yes, the movement known as Operation Dudula continues to gain traction. It's a populist anti-immigrant movement that explicitly targets foreigners.
And their tactics are quite aggressive, even targeting children.
Reportedly, yes. They've advocated for excluding migrant children from public schools, arguing resources should be for South Africans first. It's driven by deep socioeconomic problems, high unemployment, inequality, but it channels that frustration into blaming immigrants.
But the data doesn't actually support the idea that immigrants are the main cause of crime or economic problems, does it?
No. Experts consistently point out that scapegoating. Data shows immigrants in South Africa don't commit crimes at higher rates than locals. But in a climate of government failure on service delivery and corruption, foreigners become an easy, visible target for public anger. Tragically, this rhetoric and action has already led to incidents where migrants have faced violence or been denied essential services.
A deeply concerning trend. Okay, that paints a picture of significant political and social volatility. Let's move to our final segment, covering human incidents, safety issues, and the markets.
Right, segment 4. Let's start with some tragic news and natural disasters. First, from Indonesia.
Yes, the building collapse in Sidoarjo, East Java.
A truly devastating event at the Al-Khozani Islamic Boarding School, or Pesantren. A structure collapsed during construction work while students were gathered inside for prayers. The death toll reached 54, mostly teenage boys.
And the reaction from the parents and community was quite notable, wasn't it, despite evidence of poor construction?
It was. Reports indicated that even with suggestions of negligence, many parents expressed continued reverence for the school's leadership and the institution itself, rather than directing blame.
Why is that?
Sociologists explain these Pesantren are deeply respected, almost sacred community institutions in many parts of Indonesia. There are strong bonds of loyalty and deference to the leaders. This can sometimes make it difficult to demand accountability, even after such a tragedy, because of that deep cultural embedding.
A heartbreaking situation compounded by cultural factors. Elsewhere, nature's power was on display with a massive blizzard on Mount Everest.
Yes, on the Tibetan side. A severe blizzard trapped nearly 1,000 hikers and guides in high-altitude camps. Conditions were extremely dangerous.
Were rescuers able to reach them?
Rescue efforts were intense. They managed to guide over 350 people down to safety, but reports indicated around 200 remained stranded for some time in the extreme cold and wet, facing serious risks like hypothermia.
I read that local villagers played a big role in the rescue.
They really did. Villagers from nearby Tingri County mobilized alongside the official rescue teams. They actually used horses and oxen to help evacuate people from areas machines couldn't reach easily. A powerful example of community resilience and local knowledge being crucial in a crisis.
Meanwhile, the monsoon season caused devastation in South Asia, too.
Yes, relentless heavy rains triggered deadly landslides in the Darjeeling region of India. At least 24 people were reported killed, with others missing. And in Nepal, severe flooding hit, especially in the capital, Kathmandu, where the Bagmati River burst its banks, forcing widespread evacuation.
Just relentless. And quickly, amidst these tragedies, a slightly bizarre animal encounter also in Indonesia.
Slight chuckle.
Yeah.
Yes, a moment of unexpected chaos. A leopard apparently wandered into a hotel in Bandung, caused quite a panic after being spotted near a guest room on the second floor.
Was anyone hurt?
Thankfully, no. It was eventually tranquilized and removed safely. Officials think it might be the same leopard that escaped from a nearby zoo a while back. Raises questions about zoo security, I suppose.
Indeed. Okay, let's pivot to the markets and corporate news. Some interesting signs coming out of Japan.
Yes, Japan's main stock index, the Nikkei, has been showing optimism, trending towards new highs. This seems linked to the recent victory of Senai Takeichi in a key party leadership election. Investors seem bullish on her pro-market conservative economic stance.
But this optimism isn't across the board in Japan's economy.
No, interestingly, while stocks are up, the Japanese yen and Japanese government bonds are struggling, remaining under pressure. It's a bit of a split picture.
Does this internal Japanese market dynamic have wider implications?
Potentially, yes. Some analysts, like strategists at Goldman Sachs, are warning that if Japanese bond yields continue to rise, partly driven by these political shifts, it could trigger capital outflows from Japan. That money moving could then impact global bond markets, potentially pushing up yields elsewhere, including for U.S. Treasuries. It shows how interconnected things are.
A ripple effect. And globally, we're seeing classic signs of investor nervousness with safe haven assets soaring.
Absolutely. Gold and Bitcoin have both hit record highs. Gold pushed past $3,900 an ounce. Bitcoin blew past $125,000.
What's driving that? Just general uncertainty.
It's a mix of factors. Definitely economic uncertainty. The ongoing U.S. shutdown adds to that, plus all the geopolitical tensions we've discussed. For gold, strong buying by central banks and demand for gold-backed ETFs are also factors. For Bitcoin, besides being seen as a hedge, there's growing institutional investment and also some vocal support from President Trump, who seems to view cryptocurrencies as an alternative to traditional systems.
Interesting. On the corporate front, some good news regarding cyber resilience. 2 big companies recovered from attacks.
Yes, positive updates there. Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, is reportedly resuming some production at its engine plant in Wolverhampton, UK, after a cyber attack caused major disruption. And in Japan, Asahi, the big brewery famous for super dry beer, got production back online at 6 factories that were hit by a cyber incident.
So attacks are happening, but companies are getting better at recovering.
It seems so. It underscores the constant threat cyber attacks on critical manufacturing are a reality. But it also shows that robust security measures and crucially effective recovery plans can help minimize the damage and downtime, which is hugely important economically.
Okay, our last section focuses on public safety and crime stories with broader context.
Sure.
Starting in Australia with a disturbing shooting.
Yes, a really shocking incident in Sydney. A gunman reportedly fired 50 to 100 shots from an apartment window down onto a busy street, injuring 17 people. This kind of indiscriminate mass shooting is extremely rare for Sydney and has deeply alarmed authorities. It immediately raises questions about gun control effectiveness.
And in a related vein, but proactive, police in Western Australia took action against certain gun owners.
They did. Police seized firearms and revoked licenses from dozens of people identified as being linked to sovereign citizen extremist ideologies.
Sovereign citizens, those are the groups that reject government authority, right?
Exactly. This police action is a direct response to growing concerns nationally about individuals holding these anti-government beliefs, especially after a recent tragic incident where police officers were killed by people associated with this ideology. It's a preventative measure targeting perceived domestic extremism risks.
That climate of political tension seems to be spilling over into direct attacks on officials in the U.S., too. The case of the judge in South Carolina.
Yes, Judge Diane Schaefer Goodstein's beachfront home, valued at $1.5 million, was destroyed by fire. Investigators strongly suspect arson.
And this happened after she made a controversial ruling.
Shortly after, yes. She had temporarily blocked a Trump administration request seeking access to voter registration data for millions of South Carolinians, citing privacy concerns. She had reportedly received death threats specifically related to that ruling. It's a stark example of the dangers public servants can face when targeted for their official duties in a polarized environment.
Horrifying. Shifting to a personal health story, but one with a universal message.
Yes, the story of a nurse named Sophie Fay. She had persistent knee pain, but initially dismissed it as just a muscle strain, something minor.
That it wasn't minor.
No. The pain got worse, and eventually doctors discovered a rare aggressive tumor. Tragically, it led to her needing her leg amputated. It's just a powerful, sobering reminder for everyone, including medical professionals themselves, not to ignore persistent, unexplained symptoms. Seek thorough investigation, even if it seems like nothing serious at first.
A vital message. And finally, a public health effort offering a glimmer of hope in Haiti.
Amidst all of Haiti's ongoing crises, yes. The Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, is working with local authorities on a major push to combat rabies. This follows the recent death of a 9-year-old boy, Jonas, from rabies after a dog bite. Rabies has killed 4 people there this year.
What's the goal of the campaign?
They're aiming for a very ambitious target, vaccinating at least 80% of the country's dog population. Rabies is almost always fatal when symptoms appear, but it's entirely preventable with vaccination, both post-exposure treatment for humans and, crucially, vaccinating dogs, the main source of transmission. Reaching that 80% coverage would drastically reduce the risk and represents a positive public health intervention in a very difficult context.
Definitely a worthwhile effort. Okay, that brings us to the end of our deep dive this week.
It's been quite a journey through the global landscape.
It really has. And looking back, there's this striking paradox, isn't there? On one hand, incredible innovation, AI pushing boundaries, JWST revealing cosmic secrets, breakthroughs in understanding complex diseases like glioblastoma.
Absolutely groundbreaking stuff. But running right alongside it
Is this profound friction, geopolitical tensions, stalled peace talks, the U.S. government shutdown impacting science, infrastructure failures like that tragic collapse in Indonesia, and these big systemic issues like unmet climate finance pledges.
Yeah, the core tension feels like this race between rapid technological change and these very sticky, often dysfunctional political and economic structures that just can't seem to keep up or adapt effectively.
The conflicts aren't just nation versus nation anymore. It feels like a conflict between, I don't know, the future trying to arrive and the inertia of the present.
That's a good way to put it. And you see it reflected in those youth movements we discussed in Morocco, Madagascar. A generation demanding more transparency, more competence, better results from systems they feel are failing them. There's a real disconnect between established power and rising expectations.
Which leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on this week.
We talked about the failure of developed nations to deliver on climate adaptation funding for vulnerable countries. That promise of $40 billion a year is way off track. At the same time, we see these increasingly vocal, globally connected youth movements demanding systemic change, whether it's about corruption or basic services.
So the question is, could the global youth population, connected and mobilized like never before, become this kind of unexpected leverage point? Could their collective pressure, amplified globally, start forcing accountability not just on their own local governments, but on the entire international system that keeps making promises on climate, on development, on justice, but often falls short?
Is youth activism becoming the force that might finally compel the established order to bridge that gap between rhetoric and reality?
Something to definitely think about. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
We'll talk to you next time.
For enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.